Hello, YouTube. It's the Utopian Buddha. So I have been thinking about this very deeply. I was deep in meditation today and it came to me, right? I bear at least 60 to 70% of the blame for what happened between me and Yogaville. Blame, I don't think you have to say blame. I have to take 60 to 70% of the responsibility between what happened between me and Yogaville, right? Even though most people at Yogaville rejected my book, and even though my book was one of the most moral, altruistic, holy, saintly things I've ever written. I've never written a book that altruistic and that holy and that saintly, and I've never been so inspired to write a book. Actually, I've been as inspired, but that was one of my most saintly books that I've ever written. And it's kind of like a kind of sad to see how many people at Yogaville got an ego and rejected my book, just because I don't agree with everything Satchidananda says. They were still so unable to morally see, like, to see the compassion and love that I have behind that book. Very few people saw it. I would say only a handful of people in an otherwise completely morally bankrupt. They're not morally bankrupt. Let me say that. In an otherwise morally, the most of the people at Yogaville are morally fuzzy. They're not really. They don't really have really good moral discernment. A lot of the swamis have very bad moral discernment. But that being said, it's ultimately it's ultimately my fault, because despite, I would say, half of the people at Yogaville having bad moral discernment, the other half have really decent moral discernment, in the sense that even though they ignored my book, I know that the former executive director Shiva Moore, he was open to my influence until I wrote that book. He was open to my influence. I sensed his energy initially when I wanted to do charity work. He let me do it, so that was a really great thing. Most of the, I would say, and then after that, once it took some of the old people some time to get used to my book, but over some time, as they realized that my energy field was building and I kept hitting these states of bliss, I guess they came to the conclusion, maybe it was a political calculation on their part, and they were like, oh my God, this kid's gonna be somebody someday. This kid's gonna be very influential one day, which I am. It's inevitable. I'm only 34. It didn't. Eckhart Tolle didn't become big until he was 50. Sadhguru didn't become big until he was 47. So it's gonna take some time. But I am gonna become influential. So I hope they weren't interested out of political calculation. But I know that some of the swamis, were authentically. I think, actually, I only know one swami. Her name is Swami Jyoti something. I know I saw some authentic understanding in her. The other ones, another couple swamis, they had some authentic other understanding. Most of the swamis had no authentic understanding, unfortunately. So this is actually an apology, honestly, because it's a pretty bad apology, isn't it? I'm over here saying you guys have weak moral discernment. You guys aren't good. But most people. I mean, the thing is, like, I study moral philosophy. I think about this stuff deeply. So I can't be saying other people have weak moral discernment just because I've devoted my life to thinking about this stuff and writing about this stuff. Most people just have normal moral discernment. I'm just, like, really into it. So really into issues of justice, really into ideas of compassion and how to make this world a better place. So I can't really say other people have weak moral discernment. But I have to accept responsibility, because I was spiritual bypassing, because I mean, it's hard not to spiritually bypass, dude. And most of it was a result of my trauma, my childhood trauma, saying I hate white people. I really do, but it's only not the white people at Yogaville. The white people at Yogaville, as far as white people go, they're pretty decent. But I have been, ostracized and dominated by white people since my childhood. Not dominated, ostracized, more like, they've never dominated me. But so yeah, I think it's really important to say this, that I have to accept responsibility, because I was spiritually bypassing, and I was annoyed that most people rejected my book, which is a fucking sad, because that book was a masterpiece. But I was spiritually bypassing because I went straight, but I can't help but not. I had to spiritually bypass, dude. I went straight into states of bliss when I came to Yogaville, dude. So how can you not spiritually bypass, dude? How can you not spiritually bypass? All right, see you guys later.